An old man is sitting on a rock the color of ash, and the wind coming off the water tastes like salt and iron. The island is called Patmos. It is a rough scrap of volcanic stone in the Aegean, about 8 miles long, used by Rome the way Rome used every place like it, as a filing cabinet for people it found inconvenient. The old man is a prisoner. He is somewhere near the end of a very long life, and he has just been handed 7 letters to send. He did not write them. He took them down. Below the ridge there is a small harbor, and in that harbor there is a boat, and on that boat there will be a courier, and that courier is about to carry 7 letters into 7 cities on the coast of what we now call Turkey. Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. You have heard those names read aloud in church, probably fast, probably in a list, possibly in a voice that suggested the reader could not have found a single one of them on a map. So here is the first thing almost nobody mentions. That order is not random. That order is a road. In 1904, a Scottish archaeologist named William Ramsay published a study of these 7 letters, and he pointed at something that had been sitting in plain sight for 18 centuries. That sequence matches a real loop of road through the province. Land at the port of Ephesus, walk north, swing east, curve south, and you hit those 6 other cities in exactly the order they appear in your Bible. Merchants used that circuit, soldiers used it, tax collectors used it, and the 7 letters in the 2nd and 3rd chapters of Revelation are addressed in the order a courier would ride them, the way you would sort a stack of mail before a delivery run. Which means these are not 7 metaphors. They are 7 addresses. 7 cities with sewers and slaughterhouses and street noise and rent. Real people opened these. Some of them would die because of the letter they were holding. And there is one more thing about that road, which is the reason you should stay for the whole video. It is a circle. It starts at Ephesus, and after 7 stops, it arrives at Laodicea. And if you kept riding, you would end up back where you began. So watch something for me as we go. Watch where Jesus is standing in the first letter, then watch where he is standing in the last one. Do not skip past it. The distance between where he stands in letter 1 and where he stands in letter 7 is the entire point of this video, and we will not get to it for a while. So what is this? Most people file it under history lesson, or walking tour of ruins, or that personality quiz about which church you supposedly are. Here is what it actually is. 7 letters, sent to 7 working addresses, by someone who claimed to already know what was happening inside each of those rooms. Let's ride the road. The first stop is Ephesus, and Ephesus is enormous. Picture somewhere north of 100,000 people, and by the highest estimates, closer to 250,000. A marble street running down to a working harbor. A theater cut into a hillside that seats 24,000. And on the edge of town, the Temple of Artemis, 127 columns, counted by ancient tourists as one of the 7 wonders of the world. Ephesus was not a religious backwater. Ephesus was the religious capital of the province, and the church there had been planted right underneath the shadow of that temple. Paul spent 3 years in this city. Timothy pastored here. Tradition puts John himself here for decades. So when the letter comes, Jesus opens with the resume, and it is a good one. I know your works. I know your labor. I know your patience. You cannot stand evil people. You tested men who called themselves apostles, and you found them out. You have carried the weight, and you have not gotten tired. Read that again, and ask yourself what is missing. Here is what most people miss. Everything on that list is something you can do while feeling nothing at all. And then the sentence lands. You have left your first love. Not lost, left. The Greek verb means released, let go, opened your hand. You do not lose your keys and leave your keys in the same way. One is an accident. The other is a decision you made slowly, with your own hand, over years. Then comes the warning, and it is the harshest thing in the first letter. Remember where you fell from. Turn around. Do the things you did at the beginning, or I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place. Remember that word, removed. We are coming back to it, and it is going to hurt. But the letter does not stop on the threat. It ends the way every single one of these 7 letters ends, with a promise attached to one specific Greek word. To the one who conquers, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. The one who conquers. In Greek, honikon It is the root behind the word Nike, victory, the thing you shout when the runner crosses the line. And Jesus does not attach it to the strong churches. He attaches it to individuals in all 7 cities, including the ones he has just finished dismantling. Listen for it at every stop from here on. 7 cities, 7 promises, same word every time. 40 miles north, the road reaches Smyrna, and the temperature of the letter changes completely. Smyrna was gorgeous, a planned city rebuilt on a grid running up the slope of Mount Pagos. Along the ridgeline, there was a ring of public buildings that, seen from the harbor, looked like a band of stonework laid around the top of the hill. A crown. Smyrna was proud enough of the view that a 2nd-century orator named Aelius Aristides wrote 5 separate speeches in praise of this one city, all 5 of which survive. The city also took its name from myrrh, a burial spice, a resin that only gives off its fragrance when the bark is cut. Hold both of those in your head, because this is the poorest church on the list, and Jesus says 2 things to it that make no sense next to each other. I know your poverty. The word he picks is ptokeia, and it describes a beggar sitting in the road with an open hand. It is the bottom of the vocabulary. And then, in the same breath, but you are rich. He does not correct this church. Not once. There is no rebuke in the letter to Smyrna at all. What he gives them instead is a warning that some of them are about to be arrested, that they will have tribulation, and that they should be faithful all the way to death. And then, to the church in the city shaped like a crown, he says, I will give you the crown of life. And then the promise, the one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. Sit with the timing of that. He has just told them that the first death is coming for some of them. He does not promise to prevent it. He promises that it is the only one they will ever have to walk through. Around 60 years after that letter arrived, a Roman proconsul stood in the stadium at Smyrna in front of an old bishop named Polycarp, who had known John personally, and offered him the standard deal. Curse Christ and go home. The account survives. Polycarp said, 86 years have I served him, and he has done me no wrong. How then can I blaspheme my king who saved me? They burned him. The fire got the first death. That was all it got. The city shaped like a crown. The spice that has to be crushed before you can smell it. The church with nothing, called rich. But it gets stranger, because the next stop on the road is the one Jesus describes in language he uses nowhere else. Pergamum sits on a cone of rock about 1,300 feet above the plain, and the whole city climbs it in terraces, which means everything built there was designed to be seen from below. On one terrace stood the great altar of Zeus, a colossal open-air platform with a broad staircase and wings folding around it, so that from the valley floor it read as one shape, a throne. On another terrace was the sanctuary of Asclepius, the healing god, whose symbol was a serpent on a staff. Sick people traveled for weeks to sleep in that precinct, while tame snakes were allowed to move over the floor in the dark. And Pergamum held one more title. Around 30 years before Christ, it became the first city in the province licensed to build a temple to a living Roman emperor. The imperial cult did not spread into Asia and eventually reached Pergamum. It started at Pergamum. So Jesus writes, I know where you live, where Satan's throne is. He does not say where you visit. He says where you live. You have a mortgage there. And then he names a man. Antipas, my faithful witness who was killed among you, where Satan lives. Antipas is the only individual Jesus names as dead in all 7 letters. We know almost nothing else about him. He gets one line, and the line is enough. And the Greek word Jesus uses for witness is martis, which is where our word martyr comes from. That word had to change meaning because of men like Antipas. It used to mean a person who tells you what he saw. It came to mean a person who dies for what he saw. The problem in Pergamum runs the other direction entirely. Some of them had gotten comfortable. Jesus compares them to Balaam, the prophet in the book of Numbers who could not get permission to curse Israel and so taught Israel to compromise instead. If the wall will not fall, invite the people out through the gate. And then, to a church living at the foot of a throne-shaped altar, in the shadow of the emperor's temple, in the city where a man had already been executed for refusing to burn a pinch of incense, he makes the strangest promise in all 7 letters. To the one who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone, and on that stone a new name written, which no one knows except the one who receives it. 2 images. Take them one at a time. Hidden manna. In Pergamum, the meat you ate at a civic banquet had usually been killed on an altar first. Say no, and you go home hungry while everyone else eats. So Jesus offers a private meal. Bread from the wilderness, the food God gave people who had nothing else, kept in reserve with your name on it. And a white stone. In the ancient world, a white pebble was a jury's verdict of acquittal, and it was also a token of admission, the thing you handed over at the door of a feast to prove you belonged there. Both meanings work, not guilty, and come in, but look at what is written on it. A new name that nobody knows except the person holding the stone. Pergamum was organized entirely around public honor, statues, inscriptions, titles carved where the whole valley could read them. And the reward here is a name that no one else will ever see. Antipas died in a city that put its names on stone. He got a stone too. Stay with me, because we are at the halfway point of this road, and the pattern is now visible. 4 cities left. Thyatira and its impossible choice, Sardis and the cliff nobody could climb, Philadelphia and the door, and Laodicea, which is going to be the hardest one. If you want the rest of them, subscribe so the next one finds you. And in the comments, tell me which city you had never heard of before today. I want to see which name comes up most. Now watch what happens next, because the 4th city is the smallest, the poorest, the least strategic town on the entire route, and it gets the longest letter of the 7. Thyatira had no Acropolis, no wonder of the world, no imperial temple, no famous king. What it had was industry. It was a working town of trade guilds, dyers, tanners, potters, wool workers, and bronzesmiths. The furnaces ran hot enough that the town was known across the region for its metal. Which is why the letter opens the way it does. The Son of God, whose eyes are like a flame of fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. He introduces himself to a bronze town in bronze. Eyes like the inside of the furnace, feet like the metal after it comes out. You already know someone from Thyatira, by the way. In the book of Acts, Paul meets a businesswoman by a river outside Philippi named Lydia, a seller of purple, and Luke specifies that she is of the city of Thyatira. Purple dye was one of the guild trades. That is a Thyatiran export standing in that story, running a business hundreds of miles from home. Here is the part nobody tells you about those guilds. Membership was not optional if you wanted to work. You could not sell your pottery, dye your cloth, or move your bronze without it. And membership meant showing up at the guild banquet, which was held in a temple, which meant meat offered to the guild's patron god, and which usually ended in the kind of evening that everyone at the table had agreed not to discuss the next morning. So picture the actual decision in front of an actual family. The banquet is next week. You have children. Your landlord does not care about your convictions. Every other craftsman in your trade will be there, and they will notice who is not. That is why the woman Jesus calls Jezebel is such a problem. Named for the Sidonian queen who imported another god into Israel, she is not teaching an abstract theological error. She is teaching working Christians that the banquet is fine. Go, eat, keep your contract, nobody gets hurt, and she is not a crank on the edge of the congregation. Jesus rebukes the church for tolerating her, which means she had standing. She had an audience. She had, by the sound of it, a following of people who called what she taught the deep things of God. Jesus calls it the deep things of Satan, which is one of the few places in Scripture where you can hear something close to sarcasm. Then the letter turns severe in a way that makes modern readers flinch. He says he gave her time to change, and she would not. He says there is a bed coming, and great tribulation, and that her children will die, and that all the churches will know that he is the one who searches minds and hearts. That is the hardest paragraph in the 7 letters. And then, immediately after it, the tone drops to almost nothing. To the rest of you in Thyatira, as many as do not hold this teaching, I will lay on you no other burden. Only hold fast what you have until I come. He does not add anything to the people already paying for it. He tells them that the price they are already paying is enough. Some of them had lost work. Some of them had lost standing in the only town they knew. And the risen Christ looks at that ledger and says, I am not asking you for more. Just do not let go. And to them, the smallest church in the smallest town on the route, he gives a promise so oversized it sounds like a clerical error. To the one who conquers, I will give authority over the nations, and I will give him the morning star. Authority over nations to people who could not get a fair price for their pottery, and the morning star, the last light still burning when everything else has gone out, the one that means the night is nearly finished. Sardis is next, and Sardis is where the letter becomes almost cruel, until you know the city. Sardis had been the capital of Lydia, and its most famous king was Croesus, whose name is still an English figure of speech for a man with too much money. Gold washed down out of the Pactolus River. Some of the first coins ever minted in human history were struck here, and the citadel of Sardis sat on a spur of rock about 1,500 feet above the plain. With sides so steep, the city treated the position as an argument. Sardis could not be taken. Everyone knew it. Sardis was taken twice. In the 6th century before Christ, Cyrus of Persia sat below those walls for 2 weeks getting nowhere. Then a soldier in his army watched a Lydian guard drop his helmet over the edge and climb down after it. The soldier memorized the route. That night, the Persians went up the cliff. Nobody defended, because nobody thought anybody would, and Croesus lost his kingdom in the dark. 330 years later, Antiochus III besieged the same rock. A Cretan officer named Lagoras looked up at a different face of the same cliff and had the same idea. It worked a second time, for exactly the same reason. Sardis was not beaten by a larger army. Sardis was not betrayed from the inside. Sardis was not starved out behind its own gates. Sardis fell because one man climbed a rock at night while the watch was asleep. Twice. Now read the letter. You have a name that you are alive and you are dead. Wake up. Strengthen what remains. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know what hour I will come upon you. He is quoting their own history back to them, and the whole city would have felt it. But the letter does not end there, and this is the line that gets me. You have a few names even in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes, and they will walk with me in white. A few. In the deadest church on the route, he is still counting individuals, not as a percentage, by name. And to them, the one who conquers will be clothed in white, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life, and I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. A city that lost its name twice in the dark is told that there is a name written down somewhere that cannot be erased. And then the road turns south to Philadelphia, and everything in this letter is built out of one catastrophe. In the year 17, an earthquake struck at night and flattened 12 cities across this region in a single stroke. Philadelphia was one of them. And unlike almost everywhere else, Philadelphia never really stopped shaking. The geographer Strabo, writing a few years later, describes a town where the walls kept cracking, where tremors were a constant fact of life, and where most of the population simply gave up on living inside the city and moved out to the fields. Think about that. A whole community of people who were afraid of buildings. The Emperor Tiberius paid for the rebuild, and the grateful city renamed itself after him. Later, it took another imperial name under a different dynasty. Philadelphia kept getting handed new names by whoever was currently keeping it standing. Now hear how the letter opens. These things says the one who is holy, who is true, who has the key of David, who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. That phrase is lifted out of the book of Isaiah, where a palace steward named Eliakim is given the key of the house of David and told it will be laid on his shoulder. In that world, the key was not a small thing on a ring. It was a heavy piece of hardware carried openly, and whoever carried it decided who got in to see the king. That is the image. One man with the key, no appeals process. And then, I know your works. Look, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. You have a little strength, and you have kept my word, and you have not denied my name. A little strength. He says it out loud, and he does not scold them for it. This is the weakest church on the list, and one of only two that he never corrects. There is no fix this in this letter. There is no turn around or else. There is a door, and Philadelphia, of all seven, understood doors. The city had been founded as a gateway, a deliberate outpost pushed up against the edge of the Anatolian plateau to carry Greek language and culture inland. Its entire reason for existing was to be the way through. Then the promise, and it is aimed with almost unfair precision. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will never go out of it again. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, and my own new name. A pillar that never comes down. To people who ran outdoors every time the ground moved, who had spent a generation sleeping in fields because they did not trust a roof, he does not promise them a stronger building. He promises they will be part of the structure. And a permanent name 3 times over to a city that had been renamed twice by emperors in living memory. Philadelphia had spent decades taking whatever name the man paying for the reconstruction wanted to give it. Jesus tells them the last name they get is his own. Which brings the courier to the final stop on the circle, Laodicea. And I need you to understand how rich this place was, or the letter will just sound mean. Laodicea was a banking city, sitting on the junction of 2 major trade roads, wealthy enough to run its own currency exchange. It manufactured a glossy black wool that sold across the empire as a luxury textile. And it had a medical school known for a compounded powder used to treat the eyes. Gold, clothing, eyesight. Remember those 3. Around the year 60, an earthquake leveled the Lycus Valley. Rome offered disaster relief. Laodicea turned it down. The historian Tacitus records it in a single flat sentence. Laodicea arose from the ruins by the strength of her own resources and with no help from us. That is a city writing back to the emperor of the known world to say, we've got it. The one thing Laodicea could not manufacture was water. Archaeologists have pulled sections of its pipe out of the ground so choked with mineral deposit that the opening is nearly sealed. Across the valley, you could see Hierapolis, where hot springs poured over white cliffs, and people came from everywhere to sit in the heat because it helped. A short ride the other direction, Colossae had cold water running clean off the high ground. Laodicea could see both. Laodicea had neither. And this is what Jesus says to them. I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I am going to spit you out of my mouth. That word lukewarm is klearos, and it appears exactly 1 time in the entire New Testament, right here. And the word behind spit out is emeo. It is the gag reflex. It is what your body does without asking your permission. Hold that thought, because he is not finished, and the next sentence is the one they would have felt in their teeth. You say, I am rich, I have grown wealthy, I need nothing. And you do not know that you are wretched and pitiable and poor and blind and naked? Poor to the bankers, naked to the clothing exporters, blind to the eye doctors, and then, instead of walking away, he makes them an offer in their own 3 industries. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire so that you may be rich, and white clothes so that you may be dressed, and salve for your eyes so that you may see. Then, those whom I love I rebuke and discipline. And in the last picture, in the last letter, at the last stop on the road, look, I am standing at the door and I am knocking. Now go back to the beginning with me. In the first letter to Ephesus, Jesus introduces himself as the one who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. In the middle of the room, inside the church, moving between them. 7 letters later, at the end of the same road, he is on a doorstep, outside a building with his name on the sign, asking to be let into his own church. That is the distance. That is the whole road. That is what I asked you to watch for. And notice how he is standing there. He is not shouting. He is not breaking the door down. He is not walking away. He is knocking, which is the most patient and the most humiliating thing a person can do at a door that will not open. You have done this, maybe not at a church, maybe on the porch of a house that used to be yours, with your hand already up, listening for movement inside, aware that whatever happens next is not up to you. There is nothing left to argue. You knock, and then you stand there, and the other side decides. That is God, at the end of the circle, at the last address on the mail run. And even here, even at this door, to this church, the only one of the 7 he finds nothing good to say about, the same word comes back one final time. To the one who conquers, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne. 7 cities, 7 promises, not one of them handed to a church, every one of them handed to a person. One more thing, and then we are done. Remember the lampstand. Ephesus was warned that if nothing changed, the lampstand would be removed from its place. It was the church with the most members, the cleanest doctrine, and the longest hours of the 7. The Casta River kept dumping silt into the Ephesian harbor. They dredged it for centuries. They moved the city 4 times, chasing the water line. Eventually, the harbor became a marsh. The marsh bred fever. The trade went elsewhere. And by the 13th century, the people who were left simply walked away. The ruins of Ephesus today sit about 4 miles from the sea. The lampstand was removed. Now put 3 cities side by side. Ephesus, the one with everything, is a field of broken marble 4 miles inland with no harbor and no city. Smyrna, the beggar church, is Izmir, several million people, one of the largest cities in Turkey. And Philadelphia, a small congregation with a little strength in a town that would not stop shaking, is still inhabited, still there, under the name Al-Shahir. Make of that what you want. But the church that had everything is the one holding nothing. So here is what I would carry out of this. The first thing is that these were 7 real cities on one real road, and every image and every letter came out of the street the readers were standing on. Bronze feet to the bronze town, a crown to the city shaped like a crown, a thief in the night to the fortress taken twice at night, eye salve to the eye doctors. He did not send them theology. He sent them their own address, in his handwriting. The second thing is harder. 5 of the 7 churches got corrected. The 2 that did not were the poorest and the weakest on the list. Whatever standard Jesus is using in these letters, it is not the standard on anybody's annual report. Ephesus had the numbers and the doctrine and 40 years of not getting tired and lost the lampstand. Philadelphia had a little strength and got a pillar that never comes down. And the third thing is the one I would keep. In the last letter, God is outside and the door is shut, and he does not open it. He could. That is the entire strangeness of it. He knocks instead, because the handle is on the inside. So tell me in the comments, which of these 7 letters was written to you? Not the one you find interesting, the one with your address on it. Say the name of the city and say why. I read them. The courier got back on the boat. The old man stayed on the rock. And somewhere on that circle of road, on a street with your name on it, someone is still standing at a door, still knocking.